Hello, care leaders. My guest today is Adam James, and today we're going to talk about getting ongoing positive PR for your care homes. For those of you who don't know Adam, he is the founder of Springup PR, an award-winning PR agency entirely devoted to helping care operators get more leads and inquiries, a digital marketing industry leader who helps care homes get more private pay revenue and increase bed inquiries and occupancy, and a seasoned journalist, an editor and writer. An interesting fact about Adam is that he lives in Boston, Massachusetts, where he serves care homes in the UK. Today, we'll learn more about the importance of positive PR and why the media should be writing positive stories about your care homes every 2 to 3 months. Interesting things that you can expect to learn from this episode include what you can do to get notoriously busy journalists to cover your care home stories, what a good story looks like, how to get your care stories covered in various different platforms, and tactics that you can tap into to gain positive PR for your organisation. My name's Simon Parker, and this is the Care Leaders Network podcast. So without further ado, please welcome Adam James. You're running a care business, you've got a handful of care homes, and things are going well, or maybe things aren't going so well. Whatever the set of circumstances, I'm sure that you would put forward that having PR is important. But why is it so important for care homes to have a good stream of positive PR for their organisations?
Yeah. Okay. Great question. So I guess probably the first thing is what do these conversations that we have with care homes is what do we mean by PR? And usually, I mean, the issue, the problem or the issue that the care provider may face is they want to, showcase all their positive care stories or their wonderful staff or the interventions they make at their homes. To use a common parlance, to get the word out there about the care that they do, to get noticed, and ultimately to promote their reputation, their profile, and ultimately to help them get more inquiries, referrals, and improve that general relationship with their local communities, including, of course, prospective families. And then there's a question of, how can we achieve that? A key part often to get, to impress and get noticed is what's maybe called traditional PR, which is getting journalists to write good news about your care homes in the press. So for care homes, that's going to be press covering those catchment areas, which will be the regional press. So that's usually local journalists on newspapers, online, television, that's BBC, ITV, BBC Radio, those kind of channels, those mediums to essentially get noticed and to improve that reputation profile and get the word out there, as the common parlance that I hear. So, that, and increasingly, so that's also when you talk about that profile and reputation, getting the word out there, those are and what is the PR? Those are there's the press, the media, but also there's other mechanisms that it can be done now, particularly around Facebook, because that's the digital platform that people are seeing and reading. And of course, you can use Facebook strategically to capture people within your catchment areas. And again, just finally on that question, when we're talking about getting noticed and getting seen and getting appreciated, that means not getting 200, 300 people seeing your great news stories, but tens of thousands. So it's strategically you have to think about how to achieve that. So that in a nutshell is what is and why PR for care homes.
So just walking that back then from the ultimate result, you're looking for more inquiries so that you can drive occupancy. That's the aim of the game. And that's achieved by making sure that the media deliverable, whether that be kind of radio, newspaper, TV, etc., has a message that sells the culture, the environment, the great care, the wonderful experiences, the activities that are being undertaken in the home. And that needs to be framed in a way that gets cut through. And the first step of that is, I guess, to make sure that firstly that you've got a good news story that you can go and share, but also you've got to get buy-in from somebody that's got responsibility for that type of media form. Now, I guess you can own your own destiny to a certain extent by managing social media channels like Facebook, etc., as well. But I guess in the context of media, let's say the kind of traditional media, if you like, rather than social media, once you've got your great story that you can then get that cut through with, like, how do you then go about getting journalists to get that story? How do you get the story into their hands? How do you make sure that they're then going to be, I guess, excited about getting that story out there into the world? Particularly when I can imagine that good journalists, they'll get approached all the time with all sorts of different stories that they're going to want to be able to run as well. So I guess it's, even before you get the cut through with the potential audience, you need to get the cut through with the people that own those media forms, that you can actually get that message out there.
So yeah, that and that's the kind of the formula. And the formula starts as you write, and this is a key. This is absolutely key. Is you have to have a good story that's going to get the coverage. The one thing that journalists want is a good story. And the great news, I would say, for care homes is there are plenty of good news stories within your care homes that journalists would like to cover. So that's good. We are a good starting point for a number of reasons. But yeah, the key area is the story. Is it good enough to get press coverage? And my team and when we're working on this, and it's that story you should be able to say in like 10 words. So it might be, like a simple CQC, good news, and you might have a quote from the CQC report, which is like, the team are dedicated and passionate. So immediately your headline would be, Joe Blogg's Care Homes staff team are dedicated and passionate according to care inspectors. So you've got that story you can say in 10 words. And it's going to be interesting to the journalist because it's an official CQC report. So it's kind of official statement of fact. I mean, that's a standard CQC report, which every care home has, those who have good CQC reports, that's always a good chance to get coverage. But yeah, the number one is that story. And then how to pitch it. I always say, write that story to around about 300 words. Make sure it always goes to a named journalist, whether that be on television, radio, print, online. Get a named journalist so you're sending it to a named journalist. If you don't know who that named journalist is, find out. Pick up the phone, call them, find out who that journalist is. You can also find them on social media channels. Put the headline in that email subject line, so immediately when it arrives on your desk as a journalist, you can say, "Oh, that's a story," and then your email, the body of your email, to send it first by email, would have just that story laid out. 200 or around about 300 words is a good place to start, with a nice photo. Bang. So then you've sent it, and 9.5 times out of 10, you'll send that story to the journalist. You won't hear a thing. I was a journalist, and 9 times out of 10, I wouldn't respond. Why? Because I've got 100 others to look at. But if your story is good, and I, as a journalist, and the journalist you're pitching to, will know within 5 seconds whether that's a good story or not. That's the reaction you want to get. You want to get that journalist to say, "Bang, there's a nice story." Then what you do is follow up with that journalist, follow up courteously, funny, polite, in a polite way, to make sure they've got the story and find out whether they're interested. Yes, no, or maybe. And during that process, you'll get a lot of intelligence and data from that journalist, whether they like the story or not. And also, you'll start building a relationship with that journalist, which is key, because then you're going to be sending subsequent stories. And then you wait for the coverage to land. To do it right and correctly, every care home should be able to secure positive press coverage. Every single care home. yeah, should be able to secure positive press coverage, positive PR once every 3 months. And if you're doing it right, your hit rate, i.e. the percentage of times that you get positive press coverage from one pitch, should be 90%. So those are the kinds of results. If you do it well, you can get. But those, and if you follow those processes that I've just been talking about now, that will give you the best chance to be most efficient to get that coverage using those kind of techniques. There are obviously a number of other slight ways to help get those results, but that, in a nutshell, is the way to do it.
One of the marketing greats, the chap from Ogilvy and Mather, I can remember his quote, but I can't remember his first name, although it was definitely Ogilvy something. I think he said when he was creating adverts, and I guess this is a similar set of circumstances, you've got your headline and then you've got the body of the content, basically just saying, I would spend 2/3 of my time. I might be completely butchering this. Marketing people might tell me off for this one, but this is my recollection certainly. And anyone who doesn't know, Ogilvy and Mather is one of the biggest, most successful marketing brands in the whole of the world. The chap basically said something along the lines of the fact that he'd spend 70% of his time literally just on the headline. And then that would set the context for everything else. Because in a world where you're that journalist and you've got 100 stories and you're chasing down leads and all sorts of different stuff as well to work out what are the stories that are going to best serve the audience and obviously make you look fantastic as well, because that's all journalists obviously want the ability to be able to get their work seen. Getting that headline right, using the right combination of 10 words to get that good news story across, I can imagine that's of absolute paramount importance. And then I guess one of the other things that you mentioned as well, if you've got a quote from the CQC and or fill in other organization that might add credence to the story, that's obviously going to be fantastic leverage that you just want to make sure that you build into the narrative that you're sharing there, because it just makes it even more important. Talk to me a little bit about, like, if so that works great if you've got a good CQC report and everything's going well. Maybe things aren't going quite so well. How does one go about adjusting that message where maybe you don't have the opportunity to quote from a CQC report with some good quality information that helps validate your good news story? What type of other stuff might work if things haven't been going so well from a regulatory perspective, or maybe you've been unlucky with a CQC report?
Yeah, so we've helped a number of homes who've got official status might be requires improvement, but yeah, they will be doing great care. They'll be having examples of personalized care, strong human interest. So even if you requires improvement, but let's say you requires improvement or good, you are going to be having loads of positive stories outside the CQC report. So that will be human interest. That will be how, a particular, just a recent example was that a resident's love of chess was reinvigorated when coming back into the home, and he joined. The staff started playing chess with him again because that's one of his passions. And he went to the team took him to visit a local chess club, and he kind of rediscovered his love of chess. And it was a fantastic example, human interest, powerful interventions from the care team. And it was such a strong human interest story. And you write that up appropriately in a way that would grab the attention of a journalist, and you would get coverage. So that strong human interest element, because remember, the residents that care homes are supporting and look after will be local people as well. So there's always that local interest, and that resident may have been a former teacher, who may have, I don't know, been a member of the community that people will know. So again, you start to have all these connections with with the communities that your journalists are writing about. Remember, we're going after regional press coverage here. We're not going after national coverage. So that human interest is strong. And I guarantee you, if I walked into a care home right now and spent an hour with your manager, there'd be 3 or 4 stories straight off the cuff that would get positive press coverage, usually revolving around positive activities, dementia care, human interest, dedicated staff, team members who've been there for 10, 15, 20 years, a manager who loves his or her job and has been there for 10 years and loves working in care. All these feel-good stories that revolve essentially around care homes looking after our nation's elderly have strong resonance and strong uh, basis to form powerful PR stories that journalists like to write about.
Got you. So it's working with what you've got and capturing the stories in a way which is meaningful and I guess context dependent into a particular area as well. Because I suppose, like, yeah, so if you've got somebody that was head teacher at a local school that you can bring into the bring into part of that narrative as well, the people reading that, maybe they don't go to school, or maybe they did go to that school, or maybe their friends went to that school. It's making it specific to them, so the story itself then becomes more meaningful. And then of course it's more worthwhile reading because it's something that might be relevant to your local area and the kind of um, the community where the regional press is going to be distributed.
Yeah, and another thing as well on this is, and I said from the very beginning, how journalists love to write about good care home stories, is because it's actually of national public interest. It's like healthcare. Yeah? It's for care homes are the experts within local communities of looking after, supporting our nation's elderly. This is of national concern. So it's got like hard public interest as well as being a nice human interest. And if you can tie it in around the importance of dementia care and support, it's a big national issue right now. And every single care is an expert in supporting people if they are if they're caring for people with dementia, for supporting people with dementia. So you've got like strong public healthcare interests that can come into those stories as well. So the chess story that I mentioned is not only just helping Joe Bloggs rediscover his love for chess, it's about positive interventions that can support people to provide stimulating activities for people who are towards the end of their life, especially around dementia initiatives, which a number of care homes do as well. As I said, that ties in with that strong, powerful healthcare interest. So what I'm getting to is that you can weave that human interest with like what we, in the journalist parlance, we call more like hard facts and hard news about supporting people with dementia and healthcare issues.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can imagine as well. I don't think the care sector and probably the wider healthcare world is particularly good at tooting its own horn. There's an awful lot of very humble people in the care sector, which is a beautiful characteristic to make. But I can imagine I've been to. I stopped counting when I got to 400 care homes. I've been to a few, and one of the things that one of the things that I experienced was it's that kind of that mindset of I'm just a carer, I'm just a care home manager, or fill in the blank. That kind of almost like cliche mindset that is all too common in the care sector. I can imagine that the concept almost of creating a good news story. They see it so often. They get to see all these beautiful moments that happen in the care setting. That there's almost a certain amount of snow blindness to that. That they experience it so much that's just kind of the normal day to day, if you like. So Yeah, I'm completely on board with the fact that there must be an absolute ton of brilliant stories. It's capturing that correct story and then positioning it accordingly in a way which is going to get picked up ultimately by the media side of things as well. So, um, talk to me about PR strategies for care homes and how that's evolving over time, because I hear the kind of the language used around omni-channel PR strategies. Like that's a nice word if you're I guess if you're an omni-channel PR strategist. That might not necessarily mean something to somebody that's a director of a care home or somebody on a leadership team that's thinking about PR. Talk us through the dynamics of what I guess modern PR strategies look like at the moment, and just put into context that landscape as well, because I can imagine it's shifted quite a lot over the years.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, for a care home, let's focus on care homes or a care home. The question is like where are the people who you want to reach? So they are they are reachable, but digitally. Facebook, number one channel. What's the number one channel? Facebook. Why? Because that's where people age 40 plus are on the social media side, and you can reach them. So that's one channel. Then there is the local press, and we've talked about radio, television, online, and print. While the print press has declined, it's still read by tens of thousands. So there are still those numbers. And local press still one of the more trusted media versus the nationals. So you've got those channels. And then you also have other channels which wouldn't, I would classify under promoting the reputation and profile is your emails, because every care home should have an email list, and that email list should be not only families, not only prospective families, but other important stakeholders, GPs, councillors, MPs, your local charities, your financial advisors, your solicitors, your lawyers, your community groups. Local people we found do like to know what's going on in their local care homes. So that's a wonderful story that you've got the press coverage for, that you're making a fly on Facebook, on a digital channel. Make sure as well that you send everyone on your email list details of that story. So again, you're not selling or marketing your home, you're just celebrating with them about the wonderful things that your care home is doing. I just want to bring in one interesting little anecdote here. Very, very recently, because remember, it's not only families who are ideally seeing these wonderful stories, it's those most important influencers and stakeholders and partners for your homes, which are often local authority social workers, commissioners, key people. Very, very recently, one of the homes that we helped had wonderful press coverage, and the local authority saw that story. The commissioners themselves, social workers, saw that story and put it in their newsletter to all the care homes in their area. So what I'm saying here is, remember, it's those influencers. They're also going to be reading those wonderful stories about your care homes. So that's another way to reach them. That would be another channel. So there's main channels. So the press, is the digital side, which mainly is Facebook. That's the primary channel, and then of course e-shots as well as email newsletters, and of course those stories will also be going on your website as well. So I would say those are the kind of four main channels.
One of the things well, I should say before we get into this, I'm a bit of a marketing geek. It's a subject that I find endlessly fascinating, and I guess I'd kind of put PR as being a function of marketing in the kind of broader sense, if you like. And there's a chap that I follow called Gary Vaynerchuk, who's big on content creation, and one of the things that he talks an awful lot about is the attention economy. And really, that's a case of getting your message in front of your audience, where he calls it hanging out. He's an American, so he's I guess a kind of more of an American colloquialism. But he talks about that pretty much endlessly because it's kind of part of his thing. But I guess that bears relevance to what we're talking about at the moment. You've got where people hang out, and that might be newspapers, that might be reading their emails from newsletters from organizations that are going to be interesting to them. Then you've got the different social media channels and things. It's when people are in their downtime, what are they focusing on, where is their attention at, and how do you then get your message in front of those people? I think another thing that Gary talks about pretty consistently is the concept of repurposing of content as well. Because if you've got 2, 3, 4 channels that you're using pretty consistently as well, you've got those different channels that you can populate with good news content, but you can share them across all of them. And maybe you on social media, maybe you've got the quote from the article that was written by the journalist that you managed to get into the local paper, that you then get a clip of that and then you go and share that on your social media, or you add a link to it in your newsletter, and you make sure that you kind of, I guess you're almost sweating the asset, aren't you? You've gone to the effort of creating this wonderful piece of content that tells this incredible story about a resident or a team member or whatever the set of circumstances might be. It's almost like, don't miss the opportunity to get that out there as much as possible, because you said earlier that you really want to be trying to make sure that you have a good cadence of every 3 months, I think you said, around trying to make sure that you have a good news story. There's a lot that you can do in that 3 months with that same piece of content, to be able to get it out there and to get it more widely recognized. I've seen people who have got in their foyer in the front of their care homes, they'll have the stories that they've been in the local press cut into the on a frame on the wall, and they'll have those latest stories on there, so that when people go in, they're like, oh wow, this care home's so good it gets local press. And it's in a world where often care homes maybe don't have the best reputation, you're shifting that narrative around. Actually, if you're newsworthy, if you're worthy of news, if a journalist has picked up on this story and thought to themselves, well, actually, these folks at this particular care home are doing something so special that I want to give my time to be able to go and document this. That is meaningful. So you want to be able to try and get as much of that good stuff as possible, and then share it as much as possible as well. And what I guess the last thing to highlight is the fact that you might see yourself repeating the same message over and over and again because you're worried about, or maybe you wouldn't reshare the message over and over again because you'd be worried about the repetition of people seeing it over again. The likelihood is, in the different channels, the likelihood of one person seeing that piece of content more than once, because they're on different channels and their attention is focused in different spaces as well, that actually it's really, really unlikely that it's gonna happen all too often anyway as well, which is the importance of having the different channels. But if they happen to see that story in 2 different places, then it's just a nice reminder that actually this particular care home's got a fantastic news story, and maybe it almost helps reinforce that message, rather than people getting bored of, oh well, they've obviously just done well with their CQC inspection, so what? I can't imagine that ever being a set of circumstances when, if it's the right story and it captures a really, really good narrative and something special, that's people like to hear about that type of stuff. And I get final point, we live in a world of a kind of constant news cycle as well. We're used to hearing the same odd stories again. Some of them are terrible and some of them are brilliant. We hone in on the ones that we like because it will make your heart sing, because it's a good quality story about something lovely that's happening in the community.
Yeah, and care homes are in that fortunate position. They are very special in their communities because there are, if I was let me just give him a name. I know a retailer, yeah, and a retail store, and I was trying to get press coverage every 3 months in my local paper. It would be a much harder task because there aren't those kind of stories that journalists would like to write about that don't reek of kind of trying to sell and market, because there's not so much human interest, there's not so much public health interest. So care homes are in a remarkably good position compared to. And the only comparison I can make is a hospital. A hospital, you've always got powerful stories coming out of hospitals. So probably the best comparison to make is like with a hospital, is that they have a reservoir of good stories because they're helping people to recover. It's healthcare, it's interventions, it's research. Care homes are in a lucky position similar to a hospital, is that they have a reservoir of those powerful stories that they can pitch to journalists, and journalists would see them as a powerful story for them to cover. So going back to what you're saying, that does actually empower and give care homes the ability to achieve positive coverage in a way that other organizations in their communities would find a whole lot more difficult to achieve.
And that's a thing worth being conscious of, the fact that you've got that constant good news stream. Again, it's taking advantage of that opportunity and taking those great stories, because to your point, not everyone could. It's interesting what you said about the retail story. I was kind of racking my brains then thinking, surely there must be more stuff that you could talk about from a retail perspective. But you're right, unless it's something very, very special, it's going to be really, really hard to grab attention with that type of stuff. Whereas in the care sector, there is this beautiful things happening every day. So yeah, that's definitely an important one to keep note of. So let's talk practical. Let's get into the tactics then, because I think the overarching context of what we're talking about, I think, is key. I think we've done a good job of unpacking it thus far. But anyone that's going to be watching this is going to be thinking, right, okay, so great, sounds good, like the idea of it, bought into it as a concept. But like, how does one go about applying this in the real world? So yeah, talk to me about the kind of the top tactics that you could use to that you could employ to be able to get those positive PR stories.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I mean, generally, I would suggest have a target to go for. So and if we're talking strategy, so that strategy may be, okay, we are going to endeavour to secure. We're going to get a great story every 3 months, and we are going to pitch it and do our utmost to get press coverage. So that's 4 times a year, every 3 months, for any single care home. So you're going to schedule that in your diary. And we work with a lot of care homes, and to be, some have. Sometimes I see owners doing this themselves, sometimes even managers. So aside from who does it and how you do it, I think it's a matter of, okay, as I say, strategizing. Let's say we're going to do it every 3 months, and then deciding between you what that strongest story is. And then probably just doing, as I've mentioned before, I would, to systematize it, I would make sure you have a good media list for your area. So that means, and usually you've got 4 or 5 media for any catchment area of one care home: BBC and ITV television, BBC radio, some local printed press, and their associated online channels. And then you might have something like in your area, or kind of more kind of, they're a mixture between, they're kind of like kind of online, they're somewhere between online directories and media, but essentially it's going to be 4 or 5 outlets. And then you make sure you know who those are. and then you find out who the journalists are. So for BBC and ITV television, finding out how the reporters are, name and the email addresses. Likewise, for those, a very key tip here for BBC and ITV television is find out who the planners are or the news editors. It's called the planning department. Ring up the channel, find out who they are, their email addresses. These are the people who plan out what their journalists are going to be covering during the course of any 1 week. So you have that list then of all your journalists, names, emails, and have beside their phone numbers. Then you've got, you know who you're sending that to. You've found your story, get good photos to accompany that story. Either hire an editorial photographer for 150 quid, you'll get a great set of photos which you can use. Or if anyone's good with their smartphones, I'll ask them to take some good quality photos. And then write that story, give the headline, give some thought to that headline. And then write that story, 300 words, around about, and then send it. And then do that process I've talked about at the beginning, the follow-up, and then enjoy the coverage. So that's the process, but the strategy itself would be to schedule it in so it's a regular occurrence and a regular method that's part of your marketing stroke PR strategy to celebrate all the wonderful things you do, to get noticed, and to make sure those people you want to hear about the wonderful things you are doing get to know about them through all those methods we've been talking about. So just to summarize on it, schedule it in and learn from every time you do it. That's the key. The more you do it, the better relationship you'll start to develop with your journalists. And then that's a whole different ball game, because then you are able to communicate with them. You've got a line of communication. You might have mobile phone numbers of your local BBC TV journalist and your local BBC radio journalist and your local news editor for your local newspaper. And then it starts to become a whole lot easier because you've got a relationship with them and you can start to run ideas with them over the phone. So, my message would be do it, or strategize about it, think about it, do it, and learn from it every single time you do it.
Most homes and groups will be used to this kind of concept of this ongoing feedback loop, because that's almost like the very nature of delivering care, isn't it? Because of the dynamic environment that care is delivered in. Hopefully that will be a concept that will be something that will be quite natural, even if the concept of PR strategies is maybe a little bit alien to them. Hopefully people listening to this, if they follow the tactics and strategy that you've laid out, it won't be too unnatural for them. I think probably one of the things that might, if I were to put myself into the role of somebody that was going to go and do that, maybe I'll be a bit concerned around connecting with the right people. Interestingly, I don't have lots of PR experience, but with the exposure that I have had, people in kind of journalistic positions and things like that, they're usually quite attainable. Their contact details can often be, you can find them on Twitter and websites and actually in newspapers and all of that type of stuff. It's not super hard to get their contact details. Some will be more difficult than others, but I actually found it was surprisingly, well, not as hard as I expected it to be. Also as well, and again, I don't have vast experience of this, but I remember this was during the pandemic, and I didn't particularly want the limelight for myself, but I was trying to help people like Professor Martin Green and others to try and get in front of people to talk about some of the stuff that was going on during COVID. And what was really, really interesting was what you made a point earlier. If you can build a relationship with the journalist, often, even if you've got a story and you've got a concept that you like to be able to share, sometimes they'll actually help you shape the context of the story, because they know what will land with their audience. They'll know what their editor will be keen to try and sign off as well. Obviously, it takes a bit of groundwork to get to that point, but I'd say that's the kind of the juice is worth the squeeze at that point, because if you've got people that can collaborate with you, you have, to your point, you've got that open line of communication. Even if you've got the best story, if you don't quite position it in the best possible way, having somebody go, actually, if you reshifted it maybe into this type of a direction, that would be really helpful. And I can imagine you've probably got people that you've supported that are like ninjas at this now, and they've just got constant antenna up, just thinking to themselves, what are the types of things that are going on in the home at any one time, that we know, because we've had those conversations, that actually that's the type of story that we know would work really, really well with this particular journalist or this particular media outlet or any of that type of stuff. So, and I guess that's part of the feedback of the undergoing the process, isn't it, to learn how to navigate the situation to be able to max out on the opportunity. Because it's the same as anything. If people are coming at this from kind of a kind of square one, if you like, it's never going to be great to start off with. It's always going to be a little bit messy, but you're only going to get better at this type of stuff by practicing it and working at it and getting that feedback and tweaking the message and tweaking the story and working out who the best people to speak to and all that type of stuff are. So it's a bit of an evolution and a bit of an ongoing journey that people need to be able to go on as well. And what doesn't work, you take that as feedback, and then you go and course adjust accordingly. Because I can imagine as well, if you aim to try and get a piece of content out there every single month, the one story that you share, that might not be the short story that flies. It might be that you have to send over a few stories to get that one piece of content across the various different pieces of channels that you want. So obviously there's a bit of work there, but if that's the thing that takes your business from 90% occupancy to 95% occupancy, that's a big deal. Like, from a bottom line perspective, that's more money to be able to invest in wonderful experiences for the residents, more money to invest in the team, in the environment, all of that type of good stuff that running a sustainable care home business enables you to be able to go and do. And all of that comes through having a high number of inquiries in the first place. So it's super important stuff.
Yeah, and it's I mean, my background is a journalist, and it's something I personally enjoy doing. Pitching. I mean, I don't do it so much now; my team do it, but just pitching stories to the press is a fun thing to do, and when you have a good set of photos that enable your care home to be like a full page on page 3 of a local care, your local newspaper, and you see yourselves on TV, it's like, the care team love it, everyone loves it. It's just a great uplift and a celebration of all the wonderful things that you do. So there's a real satisfaction and joy in seeing journalists write great things about your care homes. It just gives a good upbeat feeling. It's very satisfying. So yeah, I think that's something to add. And actually, as an aside, if you are going to involve residents or their families in news stories, 9 times out of 10, yeah, the families love the idea, and the residents too. So, provided you've gone through your consent procedures properly, everyone enjoys being part of it. And the CQC also don't see it, will see it favourably as well. The fact that your positive interventions are being celebrated by your local communities.
I like that. One of those last points there, almost person-centered PR. Well, look, Adam, I know that you've got to run, so I think we're going to have to wrap things up for the moment. But thank you so much for your time today. I think some of the strategies and tactics that you've laid out have been super, super helpful, and I'm sure we'll have you back on at some point to discuss things in more detail. But a pleasure as always, Adam, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Simon.